Hello and welcome to this step-by-step tutorial where we'll learn how to create monster effects such as these from scratch in Blender. This will be an intermediate tutorial, so make sure you've got a good basic understanding first, and then without further ado, let's get started. Right, so I'm working in Blender 4.5 here, but it's gonna be pretty much the same for any version that you have, and we're gonna start off by just deleting everything and adding in a new fresh cube. And we're gonna go ahead and subdivide this cube, so add in a subdivision surface modifier, set it to 4 maybe, and just Shift A to apply that. And this will be our sort of blob of clay that we're gonna use to sculpt the shape of the creature. So just select this and hit sculpting, and now you can see we can start shaping this in different ways. Here we have a bunch of different brushes. The main ones we're gonna use is the snake hook, gives you a lot of control. The clay strips, it's a good way to add some mass, and the crease brush is good to create these indents like this. But you can go ahead and experiment with all of these. Everyone uses a little bit of a different setup, so find yours. Before we do anything else, we want to go ahead and enable dynamic topology here. And what this will do is it's going to add in more geometry dynamically, depending on where we sort of paint on this. So it gives a lot of control that way. I usually like to lower this detail size here to give us a little bit more geometry. So we're gonna set it to 8 for now. If you go even lower, you'll see it creates this really dense mesh. But I think 8 is good for the base here. And then we also want to work with symmetry here. So just enable symmetry on the x-axis. And then we can just go ahead and start sculpting this. First, we're gonna go ahead and extrude this mesh using the snake hook tool. Torso here. Let's give this guy some arms, something like that. We don't want to worry about the details right now. And give him a neck and a little head here. Gonna add some volume to the hands here. Now it's time for the fun part, and just some basic controls here. If you hit F, that scales the brush. Shift F will change the strength like this. Control will invert any brush. And Shift is a shortcut to smooth. And that's basically all you need to know. And I'm basically treating this as sort of like a sketch for the final creature. So I'm not too worried about any details or anything. I'm just trying to make out the shapes a little bit. See if I find something interesting. So I got this idea right here for this to be a sort of alien creature, but what if he has 2 sets of arms? So we have 2 big arms and then we have 2 smaller arms that sort of extend forward like this for maybe doing more fine motor stuff. I think that could add a lot of character. So I'm gonna grab the snake hook again and basically just extrude this blob right here. And yeah, look at that, that looks pretty weird. I like that. And we're gonna do a little bit more detailing before we are happy with this base mesh. Alright, so I think that's looking pretty cool. Now we can go on to the remesh, and then we can refine the shapes after that and also add a ton of detail to it to make it look really organic. So we're gonna exit from the sculpt mode and give this guy a remesh modifier set to a pretty low value like so. Then we're gonna apply this, and you can do the remeshing inside of Blender, but what I prefer to do to save some time is to export the mesh and remesh it in this software called Instant Mesh. So I'm just gonna export this as an OBJ file. Then inside of Instant Meshes, we can open this OBJ file, then hit Solve here, and the lines here sort of show you where it's gonna put geometry. Since we want to mirror this, I'm gonna use the brush tool here and try to roughly match the center line. See how that guides the geometry a little bit. Alright, so that looks pretty good. We're gonna hit Solve, then export mesh, extract mesh, looks fine to me. And we're gonna save this as base mesh.obj. Perfect, now we can close down instant meshes, and inside of Blender, go import OBJ, find our base mesh, and there we have it. Now first of all, let's just clean this up a little bit. So let's remove this custom normal attribute here, and also remove the sharp edge attribute here. Let's keep it flat for now and try to find the center line here. Then we want to hit F3 and search for split by edges. Then we can hit L on the keyboard and delete this whole part. Then we're going to select this edge again, change the pivot point to 3D cursor, and then we're going to scale it down to 0. And we can enable proportional editing to make this a little bit smoother. Then we're going to give it a mirror modifier, hit bisect and flip it. And there we have our mirrored mesh. We can just duplicate this and rename it to high poly, hide the base mesh, and then subdivide this. Now we have a nice and a dense mesh to sculpt our details on. So if we go back to sculpting, we want to make sure not to use dynamic topology. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to use the multi-resolution modifier later on. So keep dynamic topology off. That's quite important. And now we can go ahead and add all the details that we want. And I just realized now that one really fun thing about creating monster designs like this is that it gets really rewarding to actually study a bit of human anatomy, because you only need to learn so much that you get the general idea, and then just break every rule that you've learned, and you get some really crazy designs that still look grounded in reality in some way. So for example, you can see there is some human anatomy in the hip bones here, and in the I think it's called clavicles, and the spine and the shoulder area. So it's basically a really deformed sculpt of a human. So yeah, go and study a little bit of human anatomy and your monsters will be so much better. Now we're gonna go ahead and subdivide this one last time and apply that. And now we could go ahead and draw all of the skin detail by hand like this. But as you might guess, that's gonna take forever. So what we're gonna do instead is create a set of custom skin brushes that we can use to paint on the detail all in one go like this. So in a new blend scene, we're gonna add in a plane, scale that up a little bit, subdivide it a bunch. Then we're gonna give it a vertex group, go to weight paint and just paint the middle of it like this. You'll see why in a second. So we add in a displace modifier, but we only wanted to displace the middle here, so we're gonna select the group we just created, something like that. Hit new to create a new texture. Gonna go for clouds. Let's try this Voronoi crackle texture. Let's add in a subdivision modifier, bring that before here. Can also add a little bit more depth to it, like so. Then shade it smooth, and to extract our brush texture from this, we're gonna add in a camera, zero out the transforms like this, bring it up a little bit. Then in our output settings, we wanna set this to a square aspect ratio and change the camera type from perspective to orthographic. We can zoom out a little bit like this, and we're actually gonna use the mist pass to get our depth render of this. So in the view layer tab, we wanna enable mist, then go to the camera data, viewport display, and enable mist here. That gives us this measuring stick here. So this will be our beginning of the mist pass, and this is the end. And to dial that in, we go to the world settings, and under the mist pass drop down here, we can set the start and depth. So something like that. It's gonna be good. To view this, we go to material preview. Then we want to change it from combined to mist. There we have our sort of depth pass. Now we can just disable overlays here and go view, viewport render image. There we have it. And in the compositing tab, enable use nodes. And here we can view the mist pass. Then we're gonna add in a map range node, invert these values here. So now we have an inverted image. Then we're gonna change it from linear to smooth step. And now we can dial in these values here to extract our brush texture. And we just want to make sure that the background here is completely black. And there we have it. Now we can just render this again, and it will apply the compositing that we did. Save this as skin brush. Open up our creature scene again. Go back to sculpting mode. Hit N. Go to tool. And under texture, we can hit new. Navigate to the texture panel. Then open this skin brush. And then we can just draw this texture on here. So that's a great way to add detail without having to sculpt every individual crease like that. So I'm just going over and doing a whole pass of this texture here to make the surface a little bit more interesting. So now we have a base layer of skin detail, and where this method really shines is now that we go in and paint some manual detail on top of this. And now I'm gonna go ahead and remove these placeholder eyes and add in some spheres for the actual eyes. So I'm just gonna use the clay strip here and sort of dig into these cavities and smooth it out a little bit. Then you can go back to layout mode and just add in some spheres and place them in the eye sockets here. Then I'm gonna join them into one object and mirror it using this mesh as a mirror object. There we have some cleaner eyes, and I think I'm gonna add some teeth here as well. And now that we have those objects placed, we can go back to the sculpt mode and just sort of add in some detail around them. So that's gonna make them feel a little bit more attached to the base sculpt. I'm gonna do the same thing for the eyes here. So there is our mesh, and this looks great, but it's crazy high poly count, so this is not gonna work well for animating and previewing in the viewport. And this is where our best friend for this project, the multi-resolution modifier, comes into play. So we're gonna add in a multi-resolution modifier, then hit unsubdivide, and this will take a second, but once it's calculated, we can see we've reverted back to a lower subdivision level, and it's already a bit more manageable, but we're gonna go ahead and unsubdivide this again a few times till we get this pop-up, and that lets us know that this is our lowest subdivision level. So now we have a low poly proxy mesh, and then we can toggle our higher subdivision levels like this. It's all working pretty fast. Now we can edit this lowest subdivision level like this, scale his hands up or something, and then we can toggle higher subdivision levels, and it retains all of the detail that we made. So this is perfect for UV unwrapping and rigging and animation and all that kind of stuff. So we're gonna keep it at 0 for now, and then we wanna go ahead and UV unwrap this. And you can just hit U and go Smart UV Project. That will give you a UV map that looks something like this, which is sort of messy, but it works fine. But if you wanna go the extra mile and get some pretty clean UVs, you can go to Edit Mode and select the parts that you wanna cut, hit U and just mark seam. And basically Blender will cut the UV map where we have these marks, so that gives us the ability to control the UV unwrapping a little bit more. And yeah, this process is a little bit tedious. It's easier if you have really clean geometry with good edge loops, but I'm just control clicking here. And I'm not too worried about making it perfect, because it's gonna be quite hard to tell where the seams are when we have all of the textures and everything anyways. So yeah, it's not super important to get it like 100% clean. And I think that should pretty much do it. Maybe we add a few more cuts around the arms here. Now we can go to the UV editing tab, select everything, then hit unwrap angle based, and we have these UV islands that are a little bit better. Then we can hit F3 and search for pack islands, give it a little bit of margin, pack. So that was way too much margin. Let's go with that, and I think that looks pretty good. So let's start working on a nice material for this guy. First, we can bake the ambient occlusion from the high detailed version. So let's add in an image texture, hit new, name this AO, for ambient occlusion, and we can just scale this up a bunch so that we get enough detail. Then we want to increase the viewports level here, disable rendering on all of our hidden meshes, then go to the render tab, go to cycles, GPU compute if you have a GPU to work with. Let's lower the samples here a little bit, 32 is going to be fine. Then under bake, we can select ambient occlusion here, make sure our texture is selected and just hit bake. And it's gonna pop up right here. Now we can go back to a lower resolution to see what this looks like. And we have some issue here. So we have some overlapping with our UVs here on the face. And here we find the reason for that. We forgot to mark these edges here. It's probably gonna solve everything actually. Let's just pack that again. Looks good. And rebake the ambient occlusion. And there we have it. That issue got solved quite easily. Now we might also want to make a normal map for maybe distant shots where we're using the lower resolution, but we still want to keep the detail. So add in a new image texture, name it normal. This is going to be a non-color. And then we want to check bake from multi-res and just hit bake. Also, don't forget to actually save the textures that you bake, otherwise they're gonna disappear. And now if we add in a normal map node, plug this texture in here, plug this to normal, see that we have all of this detail here, even on our low poly version. This might not be necessary if you're gonna render it as the high resolution model. It's mostly for the lower resolutions, but it's good to have. All right, let's create a base diffuse texture for this guy. It's basically gonna be the base color. So we're gonna add in a new image texture. This one is gonna be called diffuse. Plug that into the base color. Then in the texture paint tab, we can just pull this window to the side a little bit. And now we can start painting the actual texture. We can actually use the skin texture that we created earlier as a texture mask. I also like to use the airbrush mode here. That gives it a little bit softer result. And now we're basically just gonna paint the color that we want for the creature. Alright, so there we have our diffuse texture. Don't forget to save it. Let's do some fun shading here to really bring out the details. I'm gonna switch back to the high resolution version, then go to rendered view, and here I'm gonna add in an environment texture like so. Gonna duplicate this, add in a mix shader node, add in an is camera ray, and that kind of hides the background while still keeping the lighting. And here what I like to do sometimes is to use this ambient occlusion map that we made and plug that into the roughness. And if we add in a color ramp here, and I bring in the blacks here a little bit, you can see what that kind of does. It leaves the outer parts a little bit more rough and makes the inner parts really glossy like this. I think that's a really cool look to play around with. And here of course we can enable subsurface. If we set it to skin and... whoa, never mind. Just gonna restart Blender. That adds in a ton of detail in the coloring. Just gonna name this material here, so that's the skin material. Then I'm gonna give the eyes a new material as well. Name that eyes. Maybe try transmission on these guys actually. Yeah, that looks cool. Sort of like a glassy look there. Teeth, a material as well. Some subsurface usually works good for that. We can actually give this a base texture as well if we just UV unwrap this. Add in an image texture. Plug that here, teeth diffuse, can make that white and maybe add in some yellow as well. And that looks good. Let's save that image as well. And yeah, look at that. We can also give it some really fine skin detail by adding in a mix color node. Plug that into the normal, add in a bump node, and then give it a noise texture. Plug that into the height. Make sure it's using the UV. If we scale this up a ton, see we get this really fine detail here. And you can play around with different noise textures and see what works best for you. For this one, I like this rigged multi-fractal. And if we give this a quick render, and it's looking good. So let's go on to rigging and then animating this guy. So first off, let's disable these subdivisions here. So we have the base mesh visible. Then we want to grab this guy and put him at the center of the scene here. So it's standing right there at the center. Just, yeah. Perfect. Then we want to add in a single bone, and we'll use this to build out the whole armature. So we're gonna grab this and put the first bone here right at the hip here, and then we can extrude this to follow the spine a little bit. Let's not do too many segments here, keep it easier to animate. Then we can extrude this outwards to the hip joint, extrude it down to the knee. Then let's do this set of arms, and the hands are obviously a little bit tedious, but we only have to do one side and then we can mirror everything. So I'm gonna duplicate this. It's parented to this one, and on the armature data tab here under viewport display we can also enable in front, so that might help with the rigging a little bit. Then we can just select everything on one side here. Then use the 3D cursor as pivot and just scale it -1 on the x-axis. There we go. That's our armature right there. Now we can just select this, shift select the armature, hit Ctrl P and press with automatic weights. And hopefully Blender is gonna do a good job of calculating the weights here. And it looks like it did. Now obviously we gotta make sure the eyes and the teeth follow the mesh here, and we could parent them to the bones here, but I think because of the way we set up the mouth here, a better method would be to use the surface deform modifier and select this mesh. Now they will follow the deformation here a little bit better. Just have this stretching issue going on, but I think we can solve that with a simple smooth corrective. Yeah, I think that looks very good. Let's do the same for the eyes here. So surface deform, select the mesh there, hit bind, and there we have it. So basically what we can do is just animate this armature here with the low poly version of our mesh. And let's see if we pose this a little bit. When we're rendering, what we're gonna see is the higher poly version like this. So it's both responsive in the viewport so that we can animate it, and we have all of this nice detail in the render. Another thing I really like to do to add some more life to the animation is to use shape keys. And this is super simple. Just add one basis shape key. This is the original shape. Then you can just add how many keys you want and just edit that however you may see fit, and then you can animate this value and it will basically take that shape. So for example, we could do some interesting movement in the ribs maybe. And what I also like to do is add one for breathing. We pull it out like so, bring the chest up a little bit, and we have some very simple breathing animation that we can add into the mix. So now I'm gonna do a simple animation for this, and we'll see the results. Thank you for watching this tutorial. I really hoped it helped. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment and I will try to answer as many of them as possible. If you want more in-depth help, feel free to check out my Patreon. There's some cool stuff on there and you get direct access to me through our Discord community. So check out the Patreon and join that Discord, and I'll see you in the next one.